Hello everyone. This is a welcome and introduction to Calculus 1. I'm Eric Sponza. I will be your instructor for this semester. We do have quite a bit to go through today, talking about the online nature, going through the syllabi, and just getting through some basic pointers. So a lot of information to get through in this first video. So get comfortable and let's start getting through all these different items. So the first thing is to of course recognize that this is going to be an online class, and that using an online profile, we're going to be using Blackboard, email, and YouTube. Those are the three big items we're going to need. For Blackboard, that's basically going to be our main hub. Anything that I send to you, any information, documents, course information, videos, everything will be on Blackboard. I always keep all important due dates and everything. Those are always listed, our test dates, when things need to be turned in. Those will always be located right under the main page, under the information announcements. Under your course documents tab, that is where you can find your syllabi. That is where any tests or quizzes will also be located. Under course outline, that's where I'll have all of our course materials, the videos, the notes, and everything that I send to you. So again, pretty much everything you could need. I will send it to you, but you could always go to Blackboard and get that information. If you have any trouble accessing Blackboard or any other problems, certainly let me know and we can get that worked out. The second part is email. Again, the first thing, even though it will be loaded onto Blackboard, I will email you everything. My emails will typically come on Monday, whether this class happens to be a Tuesday, Thursday, but I always like to send the emails out on Monday so you could plan your week accordingly. On that Monday, the email will contain, again, any of the links to any videos, any of the documents, any PDFs for the notes that go with it, anything else. I will also include in my email some different suggestions, some notes about the different topics, some suggestions about pacing. If there's any questions or anything that have come up, they'll also get some basic discussion. Any other information I need to share would certainly come in that email. For email purposes, I only have direct connection to your QCC email. So certainly when you send me things, if you send it from another email, that's fine. I'll mention a little later on, you should always include your full name and your course, just to make it easier on me so I know who you are and I can get back to you with any information. But you could send that from any email account. But for me, I always send emails through Blackboard, and that always connects to your QCC email account. You can set that up and you can forward that to a different email account, but again, just to realize that's where everything I send to you is going. Last, YouTube. This video is posted on YouTube. All the instructional videos will also be posted on YouTube. YouTube is just, it's a nice platform. It's accessible on pretty much any device. People can get an app and watch it on their smartphone. It's accessible on any kind of tablet, different computers. People have smart TVs and can watch YouTube there. So again, very accessible. If you're in a situation where you can't have the volume too loud, YouTube also has a closed caption option. And I've really been checking for videos that I made last semester. They really do a very good job in translating, so it's very accurate. That's certainly helpful if you need it. So again, nothing overwhelmingly special about YouTube, but just something that's very easy for you to access. All videos, just like this one, I always use the username QCC Sponza. So if you're ever just trying to find something, if you're having a little trouble with the link I'm sending, if you go to YouTube and do a search on QCC Sponza, you will get me as the user, and then as you scroll through, you could find all videos. I always keep videos up to date by course and by section. So for calculus, they're all labeled Calc and whatever section they go with. So Calc 1.4, Calc 2.1, to go with the section that matches our book. So that's again some very, very quick overall basics. Let's explain a little bit more on the week to week and how this is going to go. So our first week of class, you will be receiving an email on Thursday, because that is our first day, and this video and the review video that goes with it, this is everything for our first class. But starting next week, again, even though our class technically is Tuesday, Thursday, you'll get an email from me on Monday with the week's material. And when I send that, like I said, you'll get some basic explanation, some quick little ideas about where you should be. Our class technically meets Tuesday and Thursday for 2.5 hours per session, But the way we're going to present, we're not going to have any mandatory meetings where you have to be at your computer on Tuesday at 6:30 or on Thursday. You will have these videos and you could watch them at your, I don't want to say at your leisure, but you really should keep to some schedule, and that for some people, maybe they don't want to try and do it in 2 big blocks. Maybe they want to break it up a little bit more. So again, in my emails, I will discuss that a little bit, just to think a little bit about pacing, to think about which sections are a little tougher, a little longer, other sections are a little shorter. Always try and highlight what are essential materials that we need, that we're going to build on, versus some other things that are just good information, some good things to know. I also want to be very clear. Again, for Calculus 1, this is a pretty deep, heavy level math course. For a lot of people, this is a much tougher, a definitely notch above for a lot of the other previous math courses that you may have taken. I'm not saying that to try and scare you, but just to prepare and to realize that certain sections may be a little bit tougher. It's not all equal. And as we go through the course, and I'll mention a lot more of this later on, but we take much more of a theoretical approach to calculus, but we certainly want to mention the applications to realize, why do we care about this? Sometimes it's easy to get so caught up in the heavy abstraction of math that we forget the practicality of how this gets used. So even in these videos, I'll always be very, very clear as far as what you absolutely need to do, what the problems and the questions you're responsible are, but also trying to give you a little information and try and give you a little motivation, a little understanding of how this is helpful, but also being clear what it is you have to be able to do. So that's kind of our week to week. Homework. Every time we go through a section, there's always going to be homework posted. I will always post that under the assignments tab. The homework comes from your textbook. Pretty much always the odd problems, the answers to the odd problems are in the back of the book. We'll talk a little bit more about the textbook in a little bit as well. But homework. Homework is for you. Homework is your measure to make sure you are understanding the material. And even though this is an online instruction, this is very similar to what happens in a classroom situation. It's very easy to sit back in a classroom, to watch class, to feel like you're understanding, but then to go home and hit the homework and realize maybe not quite everything is there. Maybe there's little steps that you're misunderstanding, maybe there's little mistakes. So you really, really need to be getting into the homework as a measure to make sure that you're getting all the details you need. Now that same thing applies in an online class. You may finish the video and feel like, okay, I really got it. But if you don't test yourself, if you don't get into the homework, you're really not going to truly know until you get into the exams. And that's typically a little bit too late. So homework, it's not collected, it's not graded, it's for you, it's your measure. How much homework should you do? Most of it. If you're not getting, most math books, the homework gets a little tougher the further you go on. It's very common, the first few problems are a little bit more of a direct, here are some basic problems, get yourself going. They tend to get a little bit harder, and by the end of a homework section, there typically are some almost challenge problems to consider. I do like to give a couple of those challenge problems to get you to think, see some deeper applications, but again, those tough problems, those are really kind of a little bit more of a bonus, a little more for your information. Those middle of the road, that's what I'm always aiming for, to make sure you can show me that you understand and can apply the tools and techniques of calculus. So going through your homework is going to be a great measure for that. Now, like I said, if you don't do all of it, I'm not going to know, and some people can already think in their heads that they don't have to do any homework, but that is definitely not going to be the situation. So you should be preparing, you should be thinking about doing most, but again, a few problems that you don't quite get, a little mistake here or there, you should be getting at least 3/4 of the homework. That is a very, very good measure that you should feel confident that you understand that section and can move on. Another little measure, even when you're doing your homework, some people, in a regular situation, they've got their notes right next to them so that they're thinking about a fresh homework problem, but they're also following their notes. I mean, in a real classroom situation, you don't quite have that to be able to mimic in a test, so that may not be the best way to prepare. Online, you get a little more leeway, but still, doing your homework, you should also be thinking about, can I do a problem? Can I start a problem that I have not seen before, work to the end, get a correct solution without always flipping back every step? That's another little thing to keep in mind. So working on the homework, but also trying to make sure you're treating them as separate problems and not always flipping back. Just good measures to know that you're understanding the material and moving on. So again, not collected, not graded. So how are you being graded? It's all about your tests, quizzes, and final. We'll get into the proportions in a little bit when we get to the syllabi, but that's it. We typically have about 3 tests, at least 3 quizzes, sometimes 4. Tests, in class, I typically give you about 70 to 80 minutes for a test. Quizzes, 20 to 35 minutes, depending on exactly how long the quizzes are. Those same tests and quizzes I would give you in an in-person class are the same types, those same framework that I'm using for the tests and quizzes that I'll give you here. But now, when in a classroom you have an hour or half-hour test or quiz, online, in this format, I'm going to give you 24 hours, at least. I will typically, if we have a test that I post on a Tuesday, it will be due before that midnight of Wednesday, the following day. That is going to be our typical schedule. So I want to take one more moment to focus on that, because there are some people who just heard me say that I don't collect and grade homework and that I'm going to give you 24 hours for a test. And now all of a sudden some people are thinking that they could really kind of just wait until tests and quizzes and kind of just watch the videos as necessary when those tests and quizzes are posted. That is a terrible, terrible approach. The material in calculus is just too difficult to think that's going to work. You might get lucky, maybe someone has a little bit more of a background, maybe it works for a beginning quiz or 2, but it's not going to last. So the whole idea in an online setup is to really make sure that you're doing what you need along the way, to be self-disciplined, to make sure that you're keeping up with the class. And again, as part of my emails, I'll be reminding you if you're falling behind, and it is the same as an in-person setting. Math is probably the worst class when it comes to falling behind. You can dig a little hole, you can get yourself out, but you dig that hole a little too deep, the class is too cumulative in nature to really get out without a lot of strenuous, without a lot of difficulty and hard work to get there. So let's just avoid that. Let's make sure right from the get-go that we make a schedule, that if we feel like it's not quite working, and again, we'll continue to talk about this, to make sure you adjust. Maybe in the beginning, you feel like you've got a couple of sessions and after the videos, you get right into the homework, but maybe as the class gets a little deeper, you need to give yourself a little more time to go back, maybe a little time to not think you're just gonna finish a video in one session, but maybe watch a part of a video, leave yourself some time to send an email, ask some questions, get some answers. So again, just to make sure that we're establishing a good pace. Then you will be very successful. Those tests and quizzes, I still suggest you treat it like an in-person situation, that you have a time situated, you plan on sitting down, working on the test or quiz, getting as much done as you can, and then you can take that extra benefit that it is online, that you do have that extra time, and then you could go back and say, I'm still a little shaky on this question, let me go back and watch another video. Let me go back and flip in my notes. That's the best way to take advantage of our tests and quizzes, so that you're prepared, that you do study in advance, and that way you could work effectively to not only just get it done, but to also really get a good grade at the same time. Okay, sticking with tests. How are these tests going to go? How am I going to send them to you? And then how do you get them back to me? So I'm going to send your tests as PDF files. They will be, again, attached as an email that I send to you, and then I will also have them attached on Blackboard. Oh, by the way, I send that email at the beginning of the week. I may send other emails as well, but you will always get that first email at the beginning of the week, and then throughout the week, depending on some of the questions that people have, I may send out little extra reminders, I may send out a little quick follow-up video, there may be some little information because based off some other people's questions that I want to share. And that would certainly come up. If that test is not being posted on the first day, but it's being posted more at the end of the week, well, I will send you a fresh email when that is due. But either way, so you will get that sent to you. You do not have to print it for everything here. I mean, when we get to our syllabi in a few minutes, when we start talking about this, you can print as much or as little as you want. You technically do not even need a printer for anything that we do here. You need to be able to see the documents I send, but again, through your cell phone, through your computer, your laptop, you could access all that stuff there. And if you're comfortable that way, you can, always just have your test, maybe open on your computer, and then you just work on fresh paper. But if you want to print out your test, that's certainly fine. But when you go to submit your work to me, you have to email it to me. So how do you email it to me? Well, math is not the friendliest thing to try and type out a response and then just send it in an email format. Some people last semester were pretty clever. There are some different technologies people use like Word, but they have their tablet and they can actually write in Word and then send it as a Word document. That works. That certainly worked pretty well. Anybody, again, who has any kind of smartphone, you could always take scans. Scans are what I prefer, by the way. If you could scan your information, whether it is the actual test that you wrote, or you just had a fresh sheet of paper and you just started writing out your work, and you just scan and send that to me, that's fine. You can take pictures and send that to me. Pictures tend to be the worst, everybody. Pictures tend to, especially if you have several pages, can overload an email. People think they sent an email, but it got bounced back. So I can work with pictures if that's what you can do, but I would certainly prefer PDF. So with that, I have a few options. If you already, again, have any kind of a scanner at home, already have some scanning device on your smartphone, that is perfectly fine. We'll talk a little bit more about resources on campus. I'm not sure about the library. It's possible you may be able to use the library for some of these things, but I don't know that yet. But from home, there is this app, TurboScan. TurboScan is a free app available in the App Store, okay? TurboScan. That works very, very well. That's what I use, everybody. Everything I send to you, whether it is just, well, some things are already electronic, so that's easier. But for anything, when I write out my notes, when I send you videos and I'm working at my desk, all I do afterwards is use TurboScan and they come up as very, very good documents. So that's an app I highly recommend. Again, it's free. It's not the only one, but just that's a good option. There are also options. A little issue with some of the pictures people are sending me. When they come through as JPEGs, those tend to be a little more friendly and work for me. I have an Apple laptop, so I don't know if maybe that's part of the issue. Sometimes those pictures get converted to HEIC files, which I cannot open with my Apple laptop. But if you're having that, or just photos in general, you can also convert photos to PDFs using the, the Edit with Preview option, okay? So that's something else to consider. And again, I'll work with you on this, especially when we get close to our first quiz. Hopefully you've at least experimented a little bit, but definitely for our first quiz and our first test, I'm ready for some little hiccups if they come up, but that's where you certainly have to let me know. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get a little deeper into the syllabus. So, that's our idea with tests and quizzes. And again, we already got one of our first warnings. If you're not keeping up, this class is not going to go well for you. Again, it really is. There's been a lot of suggestion that with the presentation I'm giving you, my idea with it is that you have your own schedule. So that for a lot of people that are taking evening courses, now some people just take it because that's what's open, but another aspect to that is other people, they're taking it because they have a lot of other responsibilities. I hope this actually makes it easier for you, that you're not just trapped at that exact same time frame, 6 to 8:30 on Tuesday and Thursday, that again, whatever works for you, I think it's technically 6:10, but whatever time frame works to you, and that if things change throughout the semester, that if maybe you have some responsibilities with kids or your little brother or sister, maybe as their school situation can possibly change, they're starting in person, but maybe that changes, maybe you need to to adjust. So again, I really hope that this is the case. But again, you have to make a plan. That is the biggest and first thing you should be thinking about as you're watching this video. Okay, now let's just talk a little bit more about online. We got through a lot of the specifics of how this in particular class will work. And again, we still have more when we get to the syllabi, but let's just talk a little bit more about pros and cons of an online versus an in-person presentation. So, I want to be very upfront. I personally strongly prefer an in-person setting. I like being in person and getting to know you, getting the feel for a class. I really believe a lot in motivation and motivational strategies, to be able to look and feel body language, to know that there are certain days, points in the semester, midterms come up, people are a little beat, to have a little sense that maybe I should take it a little bit easier today. Whereas other days to know, like, I really need to push us a little harder. Certain classes, they really can respond well to a pat on the back. Others need a little bit more of a kick in the butt. So there's a lot of different motivation that goes along with that. And again, I enjoy the in-person. While we are in person, it allows for more questions. Now, with these videos I'm recording, there are plenty of opportunities for questions. In some ways, it's actually easier. You're at home, you're watching a video. If something doesn't make sense, you need extra explanation, clarity, you pause the video, you send me an email, you let me know, I'm having trouble with this homework problem. Can I send you my work? Can you tell me what I'm doing wrong? Can you give me a full solution to this? I need a little extra explanation. I was a little unclear what you were saying at this point in the video. You could say, I'm at the 2-minute and 50-second or the 14-minute, 30-second mark on the video. There are a lot of opportunities, so you can do that. Now, in class, it's nice to hear other people's questions. Sometimes that you don't even realize you had a question, but somebody else asks. That's a good thing. It also allows for a little bit more general discussion. Talking about calculus, there is a lot of really fascinating math history. I mean, we have Isaac Newton, one of the most preeminent known mathematicians of all time. He is at the heart and soul of calculus, but he's not the only one. And there's a lot of interesting stories. I have fun sharing that with the class, but in my videos, I really try and stick more with the actual what you need to know. So I won't get that deep into that. Same thing with applications. Again, we will see some direct applications, but we'll see there are so many different types of people with different backgrounds, people in math, people in science, the different sciences, people in logistics, people in business, people in health, all these different people taking calculus, and it has applications for everyone. So it's nice in class to sometimes get a question, how does this apply? How does this work? You could still ask those same things in an email. I'm still happy to discuss. Again, I try and make the videos a little bit more direct so you get exactly what you need, but we still can always get into those ideas. So please certainly ask questions. Another big thing, I'm actually the chairperson for the department's student mentoring committee. So in a normal in-person semester, I'd often be advertising other events, whether it's informational events about, data science, which is a new and growing field that the department is doing a lot with. Maybe it's, an event to promote undergraduate research, which I still think is a very good idea and people should try and consider if you can. So events that work with undergraduate research. I often give events that talk about math history. Sometimes they're meet the faculty events, study skills events. So there's lots of different things. That's not going to happen this semester. But on top of the events we offer, part of the purpose of this committee is to answer questions you guys might have. And not just you, someone who's in my class, but anybody else, your friends, your colleagues, your classmates. And if you have questions, anything about math and computer science, what is the next course? Why do we take this? How does this connect with my major? I'm trying to apply to a new school. Maybe I have a question about that. A transfer question, which math class might work better? So a lot of different possibilities. And even if I don't know the answer, I'd be happy to try and find the answer, trying to connect you with someone who would know the answer. So that certainly, again, it's a little bit nicer in person, and it kind of gives us a little bit more of a chance to get to know each other, but we can still do a lot of that. So it's slight cons, but really not that bad as far as the online. Moving on, what are some of the pros? Well, again, like I said, you get so much flexibility with this type of a setup. When you have the videos at your disposal, that you can get back to them, that in class, maybe you have a bad day where you don't feel so well, and you kind of, weren't 100% focused, and that you weren't able to get through everything. Well, now you come back, and in a math class, in regular scenarios, I describe how important it is to have a friend in the class. So if that does come up, at least you can get the notes. At least you have someone you could talk to a little bit to get a little bit of a sense of, okay, what did I miss? What's important? What do I have to get to first? But now in this scenario, you've got the videos. So if maybe it was a little late one night, you were a little drowsy while working on a video, you could always go back. Maybe you watch a video and you felt it went well, but then you started doing the homework and you still had misunderstandings. You can go back and watch the same thing again. So again, it gives you so much more as far as notes are concerned. I often talk in a regular classroom situation, the difference between the two extremes. Some people who are so frantic trying to copy every note, every mark I put on the board goes into their notes, but they're so obsessively doing that they don't get the chance to actually listen to what is being said. So at the end of class, they have a notebook full of notes, even again, accidental marks on the board are in their notes, but they don't have any sense, they don't have any of the understanding to go with it. And that's not good. And then the complete other extreme, people who really like to sit back and engage on the board, focus on everything, to see every nuance, to really catch every highlight that I mentioned. And that's really good, but then they finish class and they don't have any notes. And now the textbook certainly provides some of that detail, but for most of us, we need some of our own notes. We need something in our own words to make sure these ideas are connecting. So again, now you get the best of both, because now the two extremes that people take still when it comes to this online presentation. So I'm working here, I've got my setup, and again, when I start doing notes, you won't see me like this. It'll just be an overhead shot of my desk, and you'll just see my hand and the notes. So it'll basically be like you see me working on the board. When you're going through that, I also email you my note pages. So for some people, they still want to watch the videos, they still want to take all of their own notes, and they could take their time. That if they start falling behind on the notes, they could just pause the video, catch up, because realize, and I say this all the time in person, I say so much more than I write. So even when I write a lot on the board, you may still want to write more. Those extra sentences, those extra reminders, those extra little things. Hey, he is doing this because of this. He is using this particular theorem. He is applying this technique. The little steps we do before we jump into work, the little checks we make. You can take your time, pause, write it all out. Or some people choose a slightly different approach. They prefer to print out my notes. So they kind of have that. So they're watching the video, they have my notes, and now all they need to do is just write in the extras. They write in the extras like, okay, you don't have to copy the graph that I make or the function or the algebra or the arithmetic that I'm doing. They can just focus on copying in all the little extras. And now you have my notes with your words right next to it, and that might be something that really helps with your studying. All in all, everybody, we have to remember something that a lot of people tend to have forgotten. That when you actually write out notes, that there is an extra connection from your hand to your brain that's not just made by listening and making that connection. That is a very big memory technique. So that is why when you were a kid, they had you write out your multiplication tables. It helps you memorize. And that's why it's still a suggested technique. That even when you take good notes in a class, for some people, a big part of their studying is just rewriting their notes. It reminds them what happened in class. It reminds them, it puts them back in that setting, going through it a second time, and by writing, you open up those extra neural pathways, make those extra connections, and it makes it easier for recall when you're getting into your exams. Okay. So I think that basically covers all the general information of online. And online, I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with online. Plenty of people, it's a necessity, it works with their schedule. But I know for this semester, we really didn't have any choice. So that for a lot of us, we're still trying to make a lot of accommodations to get used to an online setting. And I'm always still trying to work with that. Last semester, we at least had the benefit of having a month and a half in person, so people were already used to my style and knew who I was and what to expect. They already had a test and a quiz, at least, before we hit that point. So as we transitioned, they already had some expectations, even as we were getting used to a new style. Unfortunately, you don't quite have that, but again, we can always talk. I always want you to feel free to communicate with me, to let me know any questions, but not just questions, concerns and comments. Okay. And the other quick thing I also want to point out is that after we made this transition, that for my students, they really seem to like the videos. I'm not saying it's a complete replication of what we did in person, but it certainly was at least an adequate substitute, and I really did have a lot of positive feedback. Okay, so again, that covers so many of the basic ideas that we need. So now, let's get into our syllabi. In person, I would definitely take attendance, and that's where I do need you to send me an email. Send me an email, again, just with your name and your class. You could reply to the introductory email, that's perfectly fine, or send it to me. My email is esponza@qcc.cuny.edu, and again, you'll see it in the syllabus and everything. So just to send me that first email, that's kind of like taking attendance. And we'll probably only have to do that maybe one other time throughout the semester. So I'll send a reminder, I will give you a reminder to do that at the very end of this video. But just to realize, that's the one responsibility for today. After you finish the video, send me an email to make sure you check in. So that way, with roster information, that I know you are a member of the class. So, syllabi. We have two pieces. We have the department syllabus, and we have my little extra add-on. Let's start with this one very quickly. So again, and notice you don't have to print this out. This one actually prints in a little bit of a goofier format. This one prints in a more traditional. You don't have to print these out again. On Blackboard, course documents, they're also attached to that very first email I sent you, but you could also find them under course documents. Anytime you need any of my information, this is a good place to go. So, course-specific information. This is, again, Math 441. This is Calculus 1. Prerequisite, completing Math 440 pre-calculus with a C or by placement. Okay? Any questions about that, certainly let me know. Technically, we meet for 4 class hours, 1 resuscitation hour, so basically 5 hours a week, and that you get 4 credits. One very quick thing to point out. A general idea for college and for study time. In college, every 1 hour you meet in class typically means 1 to 3 hours of work outside the class to keep up. Whether that is just homework, study, keeping up, reading ahead. Calculus, again, this varies tremendously. As students who take Calc 1, very often are coming from a lot of different backgrounds. We have some students who have already taken a full year of calculus in high school. They are very well prepared for the class. It doesn't make this easy, but it certainly does make them a little bit more prepared. So you still have to work, but again, at least makes it you're seeing it for a second time. But for a lot of us, this is the first time you're seeing calculus. And the ideas are not trivial. They really are tough problems that maybe in a 119 class, and we truly have students who started at 119, 121, worked their way into Math 440, the pre-calculus class, and now work their way to here. And each time, those classes, like you do take a nice little bump up in the level of difficulty of the class itself and the nature and time commitment for the problems. A lot of your problems in your lower level classes are quick 1-2 steps and you're done. And then you get to a pre-calculus and you still have some 1-2 step problems, but now you start getting more 3-4 step problems. And now in calculus, we have a couple of 1-2 step, a lot more 3-4 step, and even more problems that are more like 5, 6, 7, 8 steps. So just again, the nature of the problems, they get longer, they rely on more remembering ideas from background. You have to have some basic understanding of graphs, equations, algebra, arithmetic, trig functions. We'll do some basic review, and we'll also hit some review points and reminders as we go along. But again, those little things, little mistakes there, trickle down and lead to bigger mistakes in calculus. So, in calculus, it's kind of like 2 big parts to solving a problem. Knowing what you need to do, and then actually being able to do it. And that's where, like I said, even if you do have some background in calculus, you do know what needs to be done, you still have to make sure you're watching the videos, keeping up with class, doing homework to make sure you can do it yourself. That you're not making little mistakes on step 2 and 3 that don't allow you to get to steps 4 or 5, or make steps 5, 6, 7 way more difficult than they need to be because you're making earlier mistakes. Okay, so 5 hours per week, that's what we do. So that means an additional 5 to 15 hours keeping up. And again, when it comes to math, people think, well, all I do is homework. I do my homework and that's that. But in math, another big thing, it's not always just doing your homework, just going back. I talk to students a lot about their study about frequency versus duration. And people who think, well, I'm just going to sit down and study in a big 3-hour block, math typically doesn't work that way. Most people, after you work on math, whether you're watching videos, doing homework, an hour to an hour and a half is pretty much what our brains can take. And then you just start making silly mistakes and you start forgetting things that you knew at the beginning. And it's basically just because you're mentally exhausted. So sometimes it's actually better to split it up a little bit more, break it up. And it is efficient and effective and well worth your time to take 20 minutes to flip through your notes, not to redo problems, but to just flip through and remind yourself on the types of problems, what we've been doing. As I keep telling you, I'm giving you a lot of flexibility. Even though I basically set a schedule, I give you opportunities that if you fall a little behind to catch up, if you want to jump ahead a little bit, but always, you got to make sure you're keeping up with things. If you are very, very rigid and you're going to do your work on Tuesday and Thursday and that's it, and maybe you do a great job, you watch all the videos on Thursday, you get all the homework done, but then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, you come back to your next class on Tuesday, 5 days later, and even if you understood everything so well that Thursday earlier, when you come back to Tuesday, it's like you're starting all over again. So even if you do have all your homework done and you feel good, maybe at some point over the weekend, you do just flip open your notes and just remind yourself, okay, yes, these are the types of problems. These are the directions. Such a common problem in a math class. People say, I don't know what to do, but it's because they're never connecting directions to problems. They just see stuff, do stuff that looks familiar, and don't realize, oh, well, that's a question about continuity, so focus on continuity. This says find the derivative. You don't know what those words mean yet, but you will. But those directions are telling you what to do. So a part of your notes sometimes is just, oh, these directions connect with this technique, connect with this type of problem. And all of that is valuable, is worth your while. Okay, so a lot just on the time. The course description. Course is a semester of differential and integral calculus. Topics emphasized include functions, graphs, derivatives of algebraic and trigonometric functions with applications, indefinite and definite integrals with applications, fundamental theorem of integral calculus, conic sections. Students will develop problem-solving skills, construct mathematical models in computer laboratory using Maple, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot. And like I keep saying, if you don't already know the terminology of calculus, that sounds pretty crazy. But by the time we finish, you'll know what all those words mean. Derivative, integral, don't worry about any of that. That's just basically covering where we're going.
Curricular for which the course is required. This is for any AS or AA degree program in liberal arts and sciences, basically any science and math person and any engineering science person. But honestly, other people take this class too, because some people, while they may not need it for their focus of business, logistics, health science, they may not need it directly here at Queensborough, but they may need it for a 4-year transfer, so they take it here anyway. Because again, calculus applies everywhere. So this is something I said a little bit earlier. We take a theoretical approach to calculus. We really do focus on the abstract nature of calculus. So again, we do need all those other math skills, graphing, factoring, solving equations, working with the trig functions. We'll see lots of that stuff. And that's where we keep our main focus. The description did talk about applications, and we will do some applications, but when we get to the main application sections, I mean, we could spend a month easily on every application section we get to, because there are so many different examples. But we're not going to do that. When we get to those application sections, like pretty much every other section, we're going to spend a day. That's pretty much it. Basically it's about a day. And we spend a day and we focus on some like more core examples. And that way for you can kind of keep yourself focused on those and, realize that any test or quiz problem I give you would be a modification off of those core examples. But again, we'll talk about the application. We'll realize that it's there. I will make some little mention about, again, how it gets used in different fields, but we'll also always keep it clear what it is that you're responsible to do. General education objectives, using quantitative skills and mathematical reasoning to solve problems with the aid of the tools and techniques learned in calculus, reason quantitatively and mathematically as required in their fields of interest and in everyday life, integrate knowledge and skills in their program of study, use information management and technology skills effectively for academic research and lifelong learning. Again, a lot there, but general education objectives, any math class, but especially in a calculus class, we're working on improving our analytical thinking, critical reasoning. Those are the main tools. That, logic and reasoning. That's what we're going to hit here. And when you can apply these ideas in an abstract way, the way we will in calculus, you will automatically be a more organized thinker. And it'll help with your other classes as well. That when you're preparing a paper for your history class and you're trying to decide, well, how should I discuss these different items? Well, now you'll have a little more structure and say, well, let me go in this order because this led to this, as opposed to just writing in these circles that some people have a poor habit of doing. So just in general, you will get that analytically reasoning. That'll be a much sharper tool. Not to mention that we will use so much of the previous math, your algebra, your arithmetic, that, we'll talk about calculators, but just in general, getting all that practice, you're going to be sharper with those elements as well. So a lot of good purpose that we get, but a lot of it is the skills, critical thinking, analytical reasoning. That's what we improve in any math class, especially in a calculus class. So more course objectives, and you could read through that, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to learn techniques so that you can see how they apply to your later courses when and if those things do come up. You'll get basic aspects of it here to be able to apply later on. Our textbook. We are using Calculus, the 8th edition by Stewart. I only have an electronic version here. I still need to get some time on campus to figure out when I can go in and get some papers. But here, this is at least what your book looks like. That's Stewart. Again, all of your homework comes from the book, but more so than just homework, okay? You should be reading the textbook. We're really at a point that reading the textbook should enhance the class. Now, for many of us, if all we do is read the textbook on our own, we don't get a lot of sense. We don't get a lot of purpose. It's tough. But when you do it in addition to the videos, to your notes, now that's another way of reinforcing another aspect of your study. And now people tend to like to go two ways with this. Some people would rather read the book beforehand, get a little bit of a basic sense. Most people don't get too much out of it. They get a little reading, they see a few example problems, and it's okay. But then when they see the videos, they get their aha moment. The light bulb goes on fast, like, okay, that's what the author was doing. That's the purpose. That's why we care. That's what I need to be able to do. That's one way. Other people prefer to go the other way. They'd rather watch the video first. They realize that by reading the book, that they're not getting so much out of it. So they'd rather go through the videos and get the notes and then use the textbook as a way to reinforce what you got from your notes. And that's perfectly fine. But either way, you should recognize that your book has more to it than just the homework. If you ever get a little stuck in a homework problem, well, certainly in my videos, we're going to do example problems. We're going to do a bunch. So you could certainly flip back there. But the textbook has really good example problems. Almost any time you get to a homework section and maybe they change directions, there is pretty much always an example problem just a few pages earlier that, if you get a little lost, that can help guide you and maybe get you back on track. And not to mention that, Stewart actually happens to be a very good calculus textbook author. Other textbooks I've read are very dry. They're here's technique, you do it, and that's that. But he actually tries to give you that same motivation that I do. So it's not just, here's the technique, here's the theorem, go use it. It's very much a, why do we care? What does this do? Every chapter he starts with a little bit of a big question. When we actually get started with actual material, today we'll just do some review. Next week we'll get started with some of the actual calculus material, but we get started very slowly. And it's a lot because of the way he writes. He wants to give you a slow introduction to calculus, lead you a little bit to where we're going, but then go back to the beginning to get all the necessary nitty-gritty details so that we can get to that point. So you'll hear me say this in our first couple of videos. If you get a little lost and not quite feel like you know exactly what's going on in the first video, don't give yourself a hard time. Again, it truly is just a very generic, broad introduction, and then we will come back and say all of that. If I remember the section correctly, it's section 1.4 is our first section, and he kind of sets the stage with that, but then we come back in section 2, I think it's 2.1 or 2.2, and then he pretty much answers all those same questions. Goes back, re-asks that same first question, now uses all the little tools that we built to now we could fully answer and really get the understanding that we need. So, the textbook is important. So make sure you get a copy of the textbook. Here's a little extra information. The textbook, the 8th edition, is certainly available in the campus bookstore. I believe they are sending out a link so that you can access them and do not have to go in person. Again, that'll be some extra information I get for you. But I believe that's how they're operating so far. Stewart is a very common calculus textbook that is used really all over the place. So the textbook is out there. Maybe you have another friend who took calculus at Queensborough. They probably have a book. There are other versions. But that's the second thing I want to say. This is the 8th edition. So all the homework I give you and the page numbers that go with it exactly match that 8th edition. However, if you get an older edition, calculus hasn't changed. You know, the little bit of history we're talking about, calculus was discovered, invented, it's a very interesting discussion, which is the better word, but invented, discovered in the 1600s by Newton, and by like the late 1700s, all the terminology and techniques and everything we do now is pretty much settled. So for over 200 years, calculus really hasn't changed. So what changes in our textbook? What's so new in the 8th edition of Stewart compared to something I've actually got behind me, I've got a 4th edition and I've got a 2nd edition of Stewart. What's so different? Not much. An extra problem here or there, an extra example here or there. Sometimes the homework has shifted a little bit. So if you get an older version of Stewart, The topics, that's one thing. Every once in a while, there was one edition, he had chapter 1 was a prerequisite chapter, going back over basics, and then chapter 2 is where calculus began. The newer versions, he's back to a P chapter for prerequisite, and then chapter 1, you do get started right with calculus ideas. But outside of that, if you literally go, the topics go in the same order, the explanations are pretty much the same, the problems are virtually the same. So an older edition book can work. Just again, when you see the homework, don't expect the problems to match exactly, but you could pretty much just pick the same types of problems. And if you ever have any questions, you could always just take a quick photo, send it to me and say, hey, maybe this is something that's a little above or beyond, but it's because it's an older edition and you just want to clarify. You could always send that to me. So you do have options, but you really do need a book, everybody. Everybody's going to need to do some homework, like I said, is going to need some extra study outside of class, and the book provides so much of that. Now, whether you get an actual physical copy, an electronic version, that's entirely your choice. An older edition, the exact current edition, again, everything I post will be based off the current edition, but you could fairly easily adjust to any of the older editions. Okay, how will you be evaluated? Well, 60% exams, assignments, classroom performance. That's tests and quizzes. That's what I was saying. Your tests and your quizzes are those 60%. That's the in-class portion of your grade. And for me, it won't be a certain percentage of tests and certain percentage quizzes. It's all points earned divided by points possible. If one quiz is based out of 30 points, your tests are always out of 100. But your quizzes, some of them will be out of 30 points, some of them will be out of 50 points. A 50-point quiz is more heavily weighed than a 30-point quiz. But everything is points earned divided by points possible. You don't do a good job on your first quiz, you get a 15 out of 30, which is a 50%, which is an F. But then you do a good job on your first test, you get a 90 out of 100, which is an A. Well, that would give you a 105 divided by 130. And let's even see what that is. 5 divided by 130, and you would have an 80, basically an 81, which would be a B minus essentially. So you could see the tests certainly weigh a lot more. The tests certainly weigh a lot more than the quizzes do. Oh, actually, there's one quick thing, just going back, realizing I didn't mention calculators. On the syllabus, it says a graphing calculator is required. This happens to be a TI 83 plus, TI 84 plus. If you want a graphing calculator, enter in the market. I would recommend a Texas Instruments, a TI 83, a TI 84, not because they're a better graphing calculator, just because they're the more common ones. That in classes, this is by far the more common one. People tend to know them a little bit more with instruction. When students ask me questions, I know most of the features off this without any difficulty. When people show me like a Casio, they're good calculators, but I very often just need to take a moment, look online to get a quick reminder of how those functions work. So they're fine. The TI, I believe it's the TI 89, even though it's a later number, it's actually an older calculator. That one has a few little quirks to it, but still works pretty well. But even though, again, this says it's required, it's not really, everybody. You'll see, it's helpful. Some of the times when we talk about graphing, it's nice to be able to just plug this in, y equals, and see the graph, but it's not necessary. You know, a little bit with trig, the calculator can help, but even there, it's not necessary. Some people just like having the calculator. So again, either one of these, this is a Texas Instruments 30, still a scientific calculator. You know, it still has your basic trig buttons and log functions and stuff. So either one will be perfectly fine here. And again, to be quite frank and honest, there's really not going to be more than 1 or 2 places that you really need a calculator. So just something to have, not something to go crazy going and buying an expensive graphing calculator. If you have it, great. If not, just make sure you have something more than a 4-function calculator. Okay, so now back to the methods by which you will be graded. So again, 60%, big chunk, your tests and quizzes. Typically, it's always 3 tests, and then typically 3 or 4 quizzes, depending exactly on our pacing, how well we do at the end. Maple. Maple is a bit tricky, everybody. Typically, we'd be in person. We'd have part of our class. We'd be meeting in the computer lab, where they have Maple software loaded onto the computers. And that's what Maple is. Maple is a program that is just loaded onto computers. I don't want to compare it too strongly to a calculator because it does a lot more than that. But in a lot of ways, it's like a super calculator. Just as graphing calculators can do a lot more than a scientific calculator, Maple can do a lot more than your graphing calculator can. And again, in a typical in-person semester, we use the computers a handful of times throughout the semester. Get a little basic familiarity, and that's my main purpose with the computer. So that you've seen Maple, you're a little familiar with its computer, with how the functions work, how to make it work. It's not a computer language, but it has a few little similarities. If you forget to close a parenthesis, things don't work properly. If you put an extra space, things don't react the way they're supposed to. So there's a few little quirks to get used to. Doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that in any way. I certainly don't expect you to have Maple software or to go and buy it. It's expensive. I certainly don't expect you to go and do that. So we'll see what options present themselves. At a minimum, I'll probably send you a little folder. One of the faculty in the department wrote a really nice little workbook to help you use Maple. And I think that's helpful. I always would give that out anyway. And that might be as far as we go with it. So that 10%, that may end up just being here as 10%. We'll see if we can do anything with that. But even if we can, it'll be a very minor something. So that's kind of a little gift. Finally, our final exam. The final exam is cumulative. It truly covers everything from when we start to when we finish, and that will be 30%. So that's pretty weighty, but that'll be just like our tests. It'll still be given in the same way, and you'll still have that same large window. So again, regular semester, really have to do such a good job studying, preparing for the final. You're still going to want to do that, and we'll talk a lot more about that when we get to the end of the class. But you could still always go back and help yourself out a little bit. We don't have to worry about the lab policy, academic integrity, don't cheat. I should have mentioned that with the tests. When I collect your tests, I need to see work, okay? That is a very crucial item. Because even when it comes to some of the ideas in calculus, some fancy programs can just do the work and give you an answer and you have no idea what's going on. So I need to see some work. They're like when we go to solve their integrals is a word that we heard at the beginning of the syllabus. There are some integrals that can be solved on a graphing calculator by just pressing the right buttons. That is worthless to me. I need you to be able to understand the techniques and the idea and not just make it a button pressing exercise. So that's why for your exams, I'm gonna need to see some work. So just so you know in advance, it's not just filling in the answers, you have to give me the work that goes with those answers. So one more time, for some people, they printed out the test, put the answers on the test, but then also emailed me their work to go with it. That's fine. Other people, all their work and answer was on the test. Of course, that's fine. Other people, all work and answer was just done on separate paper, but I need to see the work to go with it. Okay, so that's my only worry about academic integrity. You are working from home. We will talk a little bit about trying to work with each other. Actually, let's just take a moment right now and say that. Last semester, because we started in person, most people tend to have already found little groups, a friend in the class if they wanted one. Someone they could talk to, someone they could get some notes, bounce some ideas off of. And as we switched to online, it seems like most of those same students stuck with that. Here, you never got the opportunity to meet your classmates. So after we get going a little bit, I'll bring this up again. If people would like to try and have some people to connect with in the class, some people to maybe through online or in person, I wouldn't recommend big groups or anything, but if you want to just have a quick meeting with masks at a little, place that is okay outdoors, just to again exchange a few notes, something like that, work on a few problems together, that's your choice. But maybe you want to do it in more like setting up in a little Zoom meeting, or if you want to do some sort of a face chat, I do want to try and give you guys an opportunity to meet and connect with each other, but we'll see. We'll see what options present themselves. Again, I'm not quite sure. There have been a lot of ideas floated this summer about what QCC might do on campus. You know, even just, will the library be open? Will you be able to come in, use the computers a little bit? Hopefully, but I still don't know any answers to that yet. So as we get more of those answers, we'll have more of a discussion and see what options present themselves. But I bring that up just to make it clear, you're getting your test sent home. If I see direct copying on tests, that is technically considered plagiarism. So certainly, you want to share some ideas, hey, I got a little stuck, remind me, that's one thing. But to just literally send someone your work and someone else try and send that in themselves, like not even writing their own work, but literally sending the same page, I mean, that is plagiarism. So I guess that's the one thing we should mention with regard to academic integrity. But at least we don't have to worry about, we don't have any papers or anything, so we could just end there. The note at the bottom of the page, any student who feels he/she may need an accommodation based upon the impact of a disability should contact the instructor privately to discuss his or her specific needs. Contact the Office of Special Services. Let me know. Again, if that applies, certainly let me know. I don't think it's as bad here. A lot of time that has to do with tests. Do you take it in class? Do you get extra time? The 24 hours really does kind of take care of that. So, but again, certainly anything comes up and you need anything from me, make sure you let me know. We'll take care of it. You flip to the back, and I've got some scribble because this was some of my notes, but you flip to the back, and now you get all of our topics. You get the section number. Actually, I've got a fresh copy. So as you just look down, you see these are our topics. This is the section that they come on the book. So like I was telling you before, when I make videos, I will label Calc 1.4, and that will be the material that goes with 1.4, the tangent, the tangent and velocity problems. So we'll see how all that connects together, and that's how I'll label my videos. There is a slight recommendation of how many hours, and that's very rough. Basically for you, you could just kind of get a little bit of a sense. This section with 3 hours, we'll spend a little more time on than a section with 2, but that's all very rough. You don't have to worry about that part. And also, if you notice, basically we're just going in order. We go in chapter 1, then chapter 2, but there's some sections, like we go from section 1.6 to 1.8, we skip 1.7, but basically we just go in order, okay? As far as tests and quizzes are concerned, just to give you a rough format, I typically take us through section 2.1. That will be our first test material, and we'll have a quiz probably about halfway through that. So quiz, make sure we're on the right track. Test covers more material. Our second test covers the rest of chapter 2, and same thing, we have a quiz in between before we get to that test. Chapter 3, another big one, not including 3.9. I normally kick that into the last group. So 3.1 through 3.7, that's another big cluster. Typically, this is where, depending on our time, but typically we have a quiz, again, about halfway, a little bit more than halfway, and then a test to finish that. And then we typically have our fourth quiz covering section 3.9 and the stuff from chapter 4. We don't have a separate test on that. We get the quiz, and then we're ready for our final exam, which covers all of it. So like I said, nice to know, but if at any point you're trying to, maybe you just fell a little bit behind, can't find my email, I always keep Blackboard up to date. So if I sent you an email and you're supposed to get through material from sections 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, well, under the assignments tab, first, under the course outline, you'd have all those sections with the notes and videos, and then under the assignments, you would have the homework from those sections. I always keep all the videos under QCC Sponza, and I always try and have the next week's videos prepared. So if you ever feel like trying to get ahead a little bit, I won't send you the link until the following week, but you could always just go under QCC Sponza on YouTube and just find the next video if you choose to. You certainly don't have to, but that's just a little note I wanted to make. Okay. Last part of the syllabus, and then we'll just wrap up a few quick notes, finish up, and again, we still have a review to finish up with this first class. So this is my portion of the syllabus, which just has some of my information. Again, you see at the top, you have my name, you have my email, my office phone number, which really is not going to help you this semester because I don't know how often I'll be able to get into my office, and my office number. So it's really, again, my email address, everybody. That is where, and again, you could always reply. If I send you an email, you hit reply, it'll get back to me. So you could always use that if you need to contact me. Okay? For office hours, this is an old copy. My office hours this semester are technically going to be Wednesday from 5 to 8 p.m. But to be quite honest, that doesn't matter, everybody. You can send me an email whenever you feel like. When you're working and you have problems, send me an email. Just be reasonable, of course, right? How long do you expect, how long will it take for me to get back to you? Typically less than a day. I check my email when I get up, try and see if there's questions, and try and get back to people as quick as I can. But you know, if you send me an email fairly late at night, you're probably not going to get a response from me until the next day. If you send me an email in the afternoon, there's probably a good chance I may check my email again later in the evening and that I can try and get back to you. But again, so as long as we're reasonable, planning ahead, anything that comes with like class, if you're having any kind of a situation and you're falling a little bit behind, just like if it was a regular in-person class, if you miss a regular class, if you want to let me know something's going on, you can. You don't have to. You certainly don't have to tell me anything more at any point that you're comfortable with. But if it has to do with a test, if we are in class and you miss the day we're taking a test, that's trouble if you don't let me know something's up. Same thing here. If I give you a test due date and I don't get something back from you, that's trouble. But if something comes up, if you know in advance that maybe you've got something scheduled for that day and you don't think you'll be able to get to your computer, let me know. No problem. That's just like if we're in person and you know, hey, you're an athlete and you're not going to be in class that day because you've got a match or something. We could easily make accommodations in that sense. If it's something more urgent, something comes up in that moment, you know, if you were on your way to school but you got into a car accident or some sort of family emergency presents itself, normally that's where I'd say, get the email, get me a phone call, but even more so here, send me the email, let me know. Maybe it's even something silly. You're having some computer problems. I mean, that happened a lot last semester. When you send me a test, I would strongly recommend make sure it actually moved into your sent folder. Every once in a while, people thought they sent me something, but especially with the JPEGs, some of them overloaded an email and then ended up not going to me, getting bounced back to them, and then I get an email the next day, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. You could still, re-forward that email to me, show me a timestamp, and that's okay, but I strongly recommend you send me something with a document attached. Make sure that it went through. And that way you can feel a little bit better. If there is any problem, now you've got even something better that you could forward to me that includes the timestamp to show that it was just a computer glitch, no other problem. But there's still plenty of other situations that can come up. And people like, well, it's supposed to do at midnight. People had some problems loading their exam and they send it at 12:05. It's okay. Just send it to me. So like I said, any real problems or anything that comes up, make sure you're keeping me in touch. And especially if it has anything to do with test dates and something's going to be late, make sure you let me know that in advance. Okay. So this is Calculus 1, a few additional notes. Well, we don't have to worry about no cell phones or anyone putting their head down. But number 3, because again, we're not in person, if you feel exhausted going through a video, go take a nap, come back to it. Like I keep saying, you need to find your own schedule. And you also need to realize that what you're doing in the beginning of the class, you may have to be a little flexible and adjust as things get a little tougher as the class goes on. So just because something worked for the first month of class, it may not work quite as perfectly for the second and third month of class. So always just keep that in mind and always keep using that measuring stick. And at any point you feel like things aren't quite working for you and maybe you want to try and run by some different options with me, that's again something else we can talk about. Let me know. But when you send me emails, like I said at the beginning, and this is now your second reminder, send me an email after this video with your name and the class so I can mark you present as kind of a first check-in. But every email for the semester, always include that information. So again, I know who you are and I can get back to you with what you need. And part of that, I say, should be grammatically correct. It's just so I can understand. More often nowadays, as people tend to use their cell phones more for their email, I start getting more emails sent to me in text type. And you really should start separating your personal contacts from your professional contacts. Keep me on the professional side. Now, that doesn't mean I need all this whole full thing, but just like the simple little text type. Hey, yo, what we do today. And people literally, you, to, and take a moment, write a sentence. I don't need a whole bunch of fluff. Hello, professor, what a lovely day it is today. You can really cut to the chase with what you need, but who you are, how I can help you, and just to make sure it's clear, are you making a statement? Are you asking a question? Just those little things so I can get back to you as quickly and effectively as I can. There are no extra credit assignments, okay? I'm giving you the roadmap. And I promise you, by the way, I know a lot of people come into calculus concerned. Well, I placed in, I never took a class pre-calculus. If you're here, you deserve to be here and that you have the right background. Some people, again, as we go along, need some extra reminders, but you'll get it from the homework. If you have forgotten some of the tools of factoring, do the homework. Maybe do it a second time. Maybe do some of the even problems. There are a lot of possibilities for you to work on, and you'll get that other background practice along the way. So if your arithmetic is a little rusty, well, do the homework, and you'll get the practice so that you're not rusty. So I'm giving you a good roadmap, but there are no extra credit assignments. I'm basing your grade off of what you can show me, how well you can apply and show the techniques and understanding of the ideas of calculus. Not if you could write me a separate paper about math, okay? So always keep track of your grades. And if your grades are not where you want them to be, if you want to get an A, well, basically that means you need A's on pretty much everything. A little bit of a lower grade on a quiz, getting a B on one test, you could make up for that. But if you get a C or a D on a test, you pretty much sunk your chances for getting an A in this class. But you could still do well. So there's always ways to improve. There's always ways to pick up and do better. But again, you have to make sure you're aware and not waiting until the final exam to realize you've got a D average and you wanted a B plus. So again, you can always talk more about that, but keep track of your grades, realize where you stand. The notes on grading, the Maple assignments will be conducted in class. Hence, like I said, you're pretty much just going to get a free pass on that because there's no way for us to completely do that. At least 3 exams, multiple quizzes. Everything will be announced ahead of time. No pop quizzes, nothing just, here we go, haha. I'll always give you a sense. I just kind of give you a quick outline on the overall syllabus of when tests and quizzes will show up. But that'll definitely come up in the emails that I sent you with our course information, and they'll always get posted well in advance. Any failure to contact me with good reason regarding this quiz and tests will result in a 0. And I know sometimes that feels harsh, but when your tests and quizzes are coming up, so if you have time and you know something, you have to travel, maybe you have to go out of the country, maybe you have something for work, again, let me know, no problem. And if something comes up more in an emergency, well, make sure you send me that email. That's it. That's all it takes. We can make other accommodations after, but we don't have to have the answer figured out, but you'll have to at least send me an email to let me know something is going on, and then we'll be okay. There are also a few notes on our schedule. We have a few goofinesses in our schedule, but you don't really have to be too worried about that. We have a few days where like Tuesday is a Monday schedule, so that for our class, we would only technically have 1 day of class that week. That'll be a lighter week. So like I said, I'll always point those things out, and I'll also point those out if we have a lighter week. That might be a good chance for people to catch up a little bit if they've fallen a little bit behind, or maybe if they want to try and jump ahead a little bit. So I'll point those things out, but not to worry about that. I also used to include a note about winter travel. Even though this is fall semester, we've had some pretty crazy days at the end of November, beginning of December. But again, we're at home, so we don't have to worry about that. So, the last thing for this first one, like I said, we still have a review, not a big long review email, but there's a few things I want to note. There is trig that we're responsible for. I'm not going to reteach you all of trig, but I want you to realize if you want an A in this class, it takes about this much trig, knowledge and understanding, to get an A. A lot of that will be the derivatives, but not all. So I will mention a few things. And to do well in this class, you need about this much trig. Okay, so we will get through some review. By the way, some of you, I know, you already know, Calc 1 is where you are going to stop. This is where calculus ends for you. If you're going into Calc 2, I'm going to tell you right now, it takes this much trig to pass Calc 2. So for a lot of students who have felt shaky about their knowledge and understanding of the trig functions, a lot of them, this is where they really start to get a lot of that. So, not to worry, like I said, you'll see everything you need, but to realize there are a few things you do want to go through that review video as well. And the last thing I just want to finish with is just this little note. These are not easy times, everybody. Okay, we are still going through a pandemic. As we noted at the beginning, for many of you, you're not taking this as an online class because you choose to. You're taking this as an online class because this is the only option. And as the pandemic goes, will things get better or worse? We certainly hope that things will just continue to get better, but we can't say that for certain. So as things change, I want to be flexible to continue to work with you. And I really want this to be a good, positive experience. But that's where, again, I'm looking forward to working with you. And if things come up, I always want you to feel comfortable knowing that you could always send me anything that you need. Any emails, always, of course, questions, comments about materials. But if other things are going on, I always try and provide what other materials are going on campus. Like I keep saying, once I know what's going on with the library, with campus availability, with the bookstore, I definitely will pass all that information to you as well, and anything else I know. But like I said, everybody, let's try and have a good, positive semester. Let's get off to a good start, and let's work together. Okay, everybody, watch the video, and here's the last note. When you send me that first email and you send me that information to prove to me that you watched the end of this, just include in that email, the Yankees win. If you don't understand baseball, that's why I'm putting it close, so that you hear what I'm saying. The Yankees win. Put that message in your email to me, and you get an extra 2 bonus points on your first quiz. So you could already get off to a good start. Okay, everybody, have a good day and finish with the review video.